Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT 90.1 FM Houston Community Radio Station. My name is Egberto Willies. Thank you so kindly for being here, my friends. Look, we have a great show for you today. We have a whole lot of outtakes on the insurrection. We got outtakes on AOC. But most importantly today, we have the one and only Thom Hartmann. Thom is going to be discussing the insurrection as well as his new books on the oligarchy. So we are going to have a good time today, my friends. But remember, we are in fund drive. This is our winter fund drive, and we have to raise quite a bit of moolah. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about, hey guys, call in and order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick thing here and ask you to please go ahead and call 713-526-5738. And we have some great offers for you. You know, we have the standard KPFT products that you can go ahead and get, the t-shirts, all of that. But for Politics Done Right, what we are offering is we're offering two of my books. The first one is the one that you guys have heard me talk about before, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. That particular book covers the economy, it covers how things work, it covers patents, all that kind of stuff, and how the way this economic system works has really screwed us all. And the one thing I always talk about is we don't want to only talk about these are the problems. We also want to talk about solutions. So this book as well, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, includes solutions. And you can have that book for a contribution of $120 to KPFT. And of course, you can break that up into payments. Just call 713-526-5738. Alternatively, my newest book is called It's Worth It. It's Worth It. How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. What's special about this book? This book is a tad bit larger. And one of the things about this book is we don't want to just look at those people on the right as the enemies. We have to look at the people on the right as good people who have been convinced of an alternate state of reality, something that is not in their best interest. And we've shown that several times on this show, that even the things that they say they want are the things that progressives in general provide, but they don't know, because the bubble in which they live, they're told that those guys are crazy, those guys are bad, those guys want to harm you. So if you were told that, you could possibly, and it was inculcated in your mind, it is possible that you could take that. Well, I give some techniques in this book. It's Worth It. How to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors. One person said, why did you call it It's Worth It? Because a lot of people always tell me, Egberto, it's not worth talking to those people. To which I say, it's worth for me talking to every human being to try to make things better, not for just us, but for them as well. So call 713-526-5738, 713-526-5738. That book as well, It's Worth It, is a contribution of $120. But guess what? The deal is this. Get both of them. Get both of these books at the same time. And the contribution is then $200 for both books. And again, you know the book isn't worth that. That's not what we sell the book for. But that is, it's a token to ask you to please help KPFT, help us continue, help us rebuild that building, help us keep giving you the message as it needs to be. We're going to be back in a little bit, but I tell you what, you have full programming today with just a little insert here. So please stick with us and let's get busy. A few videos ago, I said the one thing we cannot allow is for somehow Republicans to sweep this unpatriotic, seditious insurrection under the rug, to make it seem like it was just a riot, to make it seem like it wasn't important and that we need to move on. We cannot allow that to happen. This was an attempted coup on the government. So in Congress today, Representative Hakeem Jeffries did exactly what needed to be done to always keep these guys on their toes and not allow them to not let America see that what they did was unpatriotic. What they did was seditious. What we had was an insurrection. It wasn't a riot. It was an insurrection. It was an attempt to take down this government. It was unpatriotic. And we have to make the association. That party is an unpatriotic party. The leadership attempted to bring the government down. Check out Hakeem Jeffries and let's take it on the other side.
We're going to work with Republicans whenever and wherever possible. We did it with Donald Trump. But the notion of you coming here lecturing us on your first day before this committee, it's not about words, it's about actions. You know what? Explain your actions on January 7th when you supported an insurrection. You said it was not about words, it's about actions. Those actions, Mr. Chairman, in my view, were unpatriotic to provide aid and comfort to what Republicans in many parts of the country have characterized as a violent insurrection incited by the former president of the United States of America. You also said that any mistake is not your fault in terms of what's being taught to others. That's what the former president of the United States peddled for 4 years. He took no responsibility for anything. And Mr. Chairman, there's some members on the other side of the aisle, including perhaps former NFL players, who defended that kind of irresponsible behavior. So it's just hard to be lectured here, given the actions that have been taken. And I would just hope that we're going to proceed with some measure of truth, decency, and intellectual integrity as we make our arguments, even though we know we're going to fiercely disagree, as has been in the case in the past. I'm happy to yield.
Okay. Was it insurrection when in 2016, 7 of your colleagues objected? Was it insurrection for the last 3 Republican wins, presidential wins that they objected? No, it was not. It was a voice. It was having the people realize you had some concerns. Now, in terms of...
Thank you. Reclaiming my time, you asked the question. A violent insurrection resulted in the spilling of American blood. People died. The Capitol was desecrated. Urine and feces was left behind. The Confederate flag was bandied about. That didn't even happen in this Capitol during the Civil War. The Trump flag was placed in the stead of the American flag. That's an insurrection, that's sedition, that's undemocratic, that's problematic, and the American thing to do is to stand up to it.
Now that is the way it's done. You make sure and categorize all the seditious acts, not rioting, the seditious acts, the desecration of the Capitol. You do that. You associate these violent, unpatriotic behavior with those who perpetrated it when they didn't get their way, to those who perpetrated it even though they knew it was based on a lie. Hakeem Jeffries, that is the template of how this entire session must go whenever an attempt is made to call any one of the progressives or Democrats somehow unpatriotic or whatever. Remember what Steve Schmidt said, former Republican, now turned Democrat, because he said there's only one party left in this country that will secure our democracy. Remember, these guys were willing to take down the country for Trump. Someone that's not even worthy for party for Trump. Hakeem Jeffries hits the nail on the head. Folks, don't forget we are in Fund Drive now. Please give us a call at 713-526-5787. 5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. Support us in however you can. If you can give $5, give $5. If you can give $10, give $10. If you can give 25, give 25. If you can give 40, give 40. And if you want to really help us out, get one or two of our books. We are going with As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. I wrote this book a few ago, and this book is really good on really instructing in simple terms the economy, how it works, etc. Or get It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives. Another book I wrote. This is a good one to really kind of not only inform on how our system works, but how you can put it in terms to talk to other people. 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. Of course, you can always go to kpft.org as well, kpft.org. But please support KPFT so that we can continue doing what we need to do. Okay, let's get busy and continue. Representative Nancy Mace, Republican of South Carolina. I actually thought she was different. She voted, if I recall correctly, for the impeachment. It seemed like she had a soul. It seemed like it was going okay. But somehow, you remember that movie where Al Pacino said, I try to leave, but they keep pulling me back in, or something to that effect. It seemed like that's what's happening to a whole lot of Republicans. They got a spine, and for some reason, they must have checked the polls to notice that within the Republican Party proper, the ones who vote, Donald Trump is very powerful, and nobody wants to take that stand. Nobody wants to take the moral stand. Nobody wants to take the patriotic stand to start that push back into what we ought to be. And instead, they simply cower. We have a few of them, about 10 of them, that continue to try to push on, I want you to check this out, because Nancy Mace apparently thought that she had to come out against AOC to prove her bona fides to the new Republican Party, to the real Trump Party. And how did she do that? By claiming AOC's, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, account of what happened on Insurrection Day, on the unpatriotic, seditious Insurrection Day by several Republican Trump followers, that somehow she wanted to get back at AOC because AOC exaggerated, AOC lied. Well, you know who turned out to be the liar? Check this out.
And so we go into her office, and I'm at like a 10, right? Like I am at a full 10, fight or flight, thought I was going to die like 10 minutes ago, then thought I was going to die again, because I have to tell you, we're outside in this hallway alone. I'm banging on this door, and I'm thinking, and I'm fully expecting one of these insurrectionists to turn the corner with a gun, and that it would be over again.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez described her terrifying experience at the Capitol on January the 6th in that Instagram Live video earlier this week. And ever since, conservative media has been trying to smear her as a liar, claiming she exaggerated how much danger she was in because she was not at the Capitol building, which the rioters breached, but in a nearby office building on the Capitol complex. And now her Republican colleague Nancy Mace of South Carolina has joined the bad faith attacks on AOC's credibility, tweeting yesterday, quote, "I'm 2 doors down from AOC and no insurrectionist stormed our hallway," along with a Fox News article about AOC facing backlash for her account of the events. Nancy Mace piled on even further in an interview on Fox News that afternoon.
Not at one moment during the events of January 6th did any rioter or any insurrectionist come down the hallways where our offices are located. I initially, took to task the press for making these claims, taking these claims to apocalyptic levels, and all I did was state the facts. I live in reality. I deal with facts and not fiction. And I said that there were no rioters in the hallways of Cannon. I'm 2 doors down from you. And she lost it today. She doesn't deal in reality. She hasn't been doing that today. I think it's really important that we take members to task when they're not being honest with the American people.
Hold on. First off, AOC never claimed there were insurrectionists in her hallway. But more importantly, in terms of the threat, Nancy Mace was there that day too. So what did she say about it at the time? Well, in the midst of the riots on January the 6th, she tweeted about, quote, evacuating her office in Cannon due to a nearby threat. A nearby threat. The next morning, she described the danger she felt she was in.
At one point, when we were evacuated because of the bomb threat, the pipe bomb threat, I was stuck in a narrow tunnel with 100 other people, staff and members of Congress. It was a very dangerous situation. Lives were put at risk. And my message to Americans today is it was a very sad day in our nation's history.
It was a very dangerous situation. Mace gave more details to a South Carolina newspaper that day, saying she barricaded herself inside her office during the attack, fearing that Trump supporters she had seen staying at her hotel might target her. After she voted to certify the electoral votes, Mace said she decided to sleep in her office that night. In fact, she was so fearful in the wake of the attack that she told a local news station she intended to carry a gun on Capitol Hill, saying, quote, I will not be put in that situation again. So, to be clear, Nancy Mace wants to carry a gun and barricaded herself in her office. But AOC is lying about and exaggerating the threat. These people are shameful. We all know the attackers were spread out across the complex. We've seen the images, and the feds are seeing data like this. Those dots are the cell phone locations of insurrectionists inside the Capitol building on January the 6th. It's part of a remarkable set of data being used to identify individuals in the mob with the help of Big Brother.
Now, it behooves me. Donald Trump has taught his pew a lot. And this is what he's taught them. Irrespective of all the evidence out there, you may be on tape, you may be on video, you may have written something, you may have tweeted something, you may have texted something. It doesn't really matter. Just lie. And even if the evidence stares you in the face, lie. Because if you live in an alternate state of reality, reality is what you've written, what you've texted, what's on video, and all those things, that's reality. But you're in an alternate state of reality, and the people who follow you are happy to live in an alternate state of reality, and thus you don't have to abide by reality. I thought Nancy Mace was different. I thought she was going to be the change. She's young. She's new. I thought she was going to be the change, the new Republican. It turns out that they are so fearful of their base that they won't do it. Change party, girl. The Democratic Party is available, from what they tell me, to people that are blue, to people that are conservative, to people that are progressive. And fight your morals through. Fight what you believe in. I hope you like that. Now, folks, let's get busy with one little quick pitch again, and then we'll be right back to the regular programming. Please consider getting It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. Contribution of $120 to KPFT gets you this book as the token of thank you, as well as I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. That one is as well a donation of $120 to KPFT, of course, in the name of Politics Done Right. Folks, please go ahead. By the way, if you get both of them, it's a $200 contribution, and you get both of them. Contribution to KPFT 90.1 FM, Houston's community station. That's how we stay alive, folks. Let's get back, and we'll be back one more time, and let's get busy. This is a must-see on GPS. Fareed Zakaria did a perfect analysis of how the GOP became what it is today. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
The real big lie at the heart of the modern Republican Party, though, is about public policy, not conspiracy theories. Since the 1930s, Republicans promised their voters the repeal of FDR's New Deal. When the next Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower, did nothing of the sort, the modern conservative movement emerged, furiously branding Ike a traitor. When LBJ enacted the Great Society, conservatives pledged that once elected, they would tear it all down, and never did. Ronald Reagan launched his political career by denouncing Medicare as a direct path to socialism. If passed, he famously warned,
"You and I are going to spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Of course, as president for 8 years, Reagan left Medicare largely intact and actually ended up expanding the program. In the early 1990s, House Leader Newt Gingrich doubled down on a rhetoric of radicalism and extremism, revolution, and described political opponents as the embodiment of evil, who win only because they lie and cheat. Ted Cruz follows the same strategy today still. His 2016 platform included promises to repeal Obamacare, abolish the IRS, and balance the budget, plans that he knew could never get enacted. But they were just the right red meat for the base. He treats his supporters like cannon fodder, whipping them into hysteria and sending them into battle. The Republican Party endlessly crowed about repealing and replacing Obamacare, only to come to power without any viable plan, and then quickly accommodated itself to the reality it had vowed to overturn. This entire decades-long strategy has led millions of Republicans to feel cheated and lied to by their leaders, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and suspicion toward anyone who is not utterly extreme. It also feeds the notion that true conservatism fails because of some kind of treason, betrayal, or collusion. It is a short and direct line from the tactics of Newt Gingrich to the January 6th Capitol riot. If you're looking for an alternative path for a conservative leader, one who even knows how to appeal to populist and nationalist sentiment, look at British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Johnson, who initially and badly bungled COVID-19, is tackling the pandemic with much greater seriousness. He has been slowly but surely reshaping his party to make it more compatible with modern-day Britain. His cabinet is remarkably diverse, with 2 of the 3 most powerful positions filled by Asian Britons. Describing his plans for big spending during the pandemic and after, Johnson admits,
"It sounds like a New Deal. And all I can say is, if that is so, then that is how it's meant to sound and how it's meant to be. Because that is what the times demand. A government that is powerful and determined and that puts its arms around people at a time of crisis. We will build, build, build. Build back better, build back greener, build back faster."
If Republicans are searching for a conservatism that can work in the modern era, they should first stop lying to their own voters. Then they could look to examples like Britain to bring their party into the world of facts and reality.
That was great. Now, I differ with Fareed Zakaria with one thing. He makes it seem as if the lie that they tell the American people is that they're going to repeal something that they won't. I think it's deeper than that. The lie that they tell the American people is that government doesn't work. The lie that they tell the American people is that progressive policies that Americans really need, and actually that Americans say they want, is somehow detrimental to the economic system or create some sort of a communist government. That is the real lie, not that they are going to repeal policy. They know that they can't repeal policy because when Americans see the reality of the repealing of those policies, they would react and not react very well. So instead, they pump them up with lies, and when the lies don't materialize, they have to create conspiracy stories, and that's what we get. However, we look at Boris Johnson in Britain, and he acknowledges what all progressives know, and he does it without saying it. Build back better, build back greener, have a powerful government that can hug its population when they are in need. He is describing what it is to be a progressive. Forget about the other issues about what he thinks of internationally. Forget about the other issues about what he thinks ideologically. We don't care about somebody's personal ideology. We care about how they effect a government to work for the people. And those values that do that are progressive values. And when you see a Boris Johnson sound like a Johnson from America, like a Roosevelt from America, like a now Biden for America to some extent, as he says, I am not going to allow you to decide how we spend for the best in the best interests of the American people. After all, under the policies of Democrats over the last 100 years, that is when America's economy has been successful by more than 2 times that of Republican government. So, Republicans, Fareed Zakaria, heed his warning. Unfortunately, I doubt that will happen. Hope you like that, folks. 713-526-5738. 713-526-5738. The book, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. $120 contribution in name Politics and Right on KPFT. Or It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. Again, another contribution of $120 to KPFT in the honor of Politics and Right. Or you can get them both for $200. Guess what's up now? The one and only Thom Hartmann. We are honored once again. I've told this guy every time he comes out with something new, we've got to have it. And Thom Hartmann is here with us. For
hey,
those of you
Alberto.
Hey, how you doing, buddy? You answered before I got a chance to give you the proper introduction, my brother.
Okay.
I want to give you that. Thom Hartmann is the progressive national and international talk show host. He's been named the most important progressive host by Talkers magazine. He's also a New York Times best-selling author whose books have been translated into multiple languages. Thom Hartmann Show has been a top 10 talk radio show for over a decade. It's one that all of us live up to. All of us that are doing this the guy. And he's here to discuss his new book, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. Thom Hartmann, how are you doing today, my brother?
I'm great. It's always wonderful to be here with you, Egberto.
Well, I mean, it's always great being with you. It's always great seeing you. Last time we met, we could actually shake hands and have a hug in where was that? Philadelphia,
Philly,
I think.
wasn't it?
Yeah, Netroots in Philadelphia. Now we're all locked up for a year.
Yeah, it's very strange.
But
we're still alive.
Hey, we're still alive. We made it through so far, so good. We just have to hold on a bit longer. But anyhow, Thom, you told me you were going to write this book. And, I hadn't read it. I scanned through it. I knew the interview was coming up and I said, I got to get to it. And I went to a particular part on it to say, you were reading the tea leaves, man.
Mm.
You were reading the tea leaves on the oligarchy, the formation, not only the formation of the oligarchy, but how it needed a sort of a insurrection to come. Lead the insurrection to kind of metastasize itself. I tell you what. Why don't you tell me why did you write the book first of all?
Well, I wrote the book because I've been watching this process my entire life, and I'm getting increasingly alarmed by it. Over the last 20 years, we have seen America pretty much slide into full-blown oligarchy. And oligarchy is defined as rule by the rich, essentially. A small number of very wealthy people take over the political system of a nation. And the principal signal of an oligarchy, the signature that you see in the data that indicates oligarchy, is when government stops doing what the majority of the people want, which is what's called democracy, and starts doing what the oligarchs want, the very, very rich, which is oligarchy. And a couple of years ago, Gillens and Page, these two researchers out of Northwestern and Princeton, published this mind-boggling study where they went back and looked at pre-Reagan Revolution, by and large, what the majority of people wanted, pre-1980, what the majority of people wanted got translated into legislation. It's how we got Medicare and Medicaid and long-term unemployment insurance and food stamps and Pell Grants and housing assistance and anti-discrimination laws and civil rights laws and voting rights. I could go on, right? I mean, the list would be 100 things long. That all happened in the 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and right up until the early 1980s. Reagan comes in and flips our system upside down. It really was a revolution, and not just an economic revolution, a political revolution. He brings in the oligarchs with a little help from the Supreme Court, and they set up shop and take over. And what Gillens and Page found was that they published their study in 2014, but what they found is in the roughly decade and a half leading up to that, since about 2000, what the average person wants, as measured by public opinion polls on public policy, almost never gets translated into public policy. It's the association between the two has been reduced to what they described as random noise, whereas what the oligarchs want, what the top 1% wants, is almost always translated into public policy, or when public policy is created, it's most often driven by what the oligarchs want. There was basically one legislative accomplishment of the entire 4 years of the Trump administration, a $2 trillion tax cut for billionaires and big corporations. That's oligarchy. The problem, and the thing that keeps me up at night is that oligarchies tend to be very unstable. They tend not to last very long, typically not more than a generation. And what comes out of them typically is one of two things. Either the people rise up, overthrow the oligarchs, and you flip back into a democracy. This is when a democracy becomes an oligarchy. Either the small d Democrats or small r Republicans, the people who believe in a democratic republic, flip the country back, which happened here in the United States twice. Once with the Civil War, when we fought back the oligarchy in the South, and once in the 1930s when Franklin Roosevelt fought back the oligarchs who had crashed the economy. Or the oligarchs look around and say, hey, pretty good system we got here. We're scraping all this money off the middle class, and we're getting richer and richer. And these pesky people, we got to do something about it. And they flip the government into a police state. And you're watching that happen right now in Hungary, in Russia, in Venezuela, in Brazil, in the Philippines, in Turkey, in Egypt. I mean, you could just go through the list of countries that at one point were democratic. The oligarchs took over, and then when the oligarchs were challenged, when the people were in the streets, the oligarchs said, "Okay, that's it. End of discussion. We're going to go full police state." And we're on that knife's edge right now here in the United States.
You just mentioned police state, and did it bother you when you realized there were a whole lot of organized ex-military guys going through the Capitol during the insurrection?
Didn't surprise me at all.
Not at all.
No, I mean, in fact, that's what you would expect. The fascism is most attractive to people who have what are called authoritarian personalities. Robert Altmaier wrote a book about this called The Authoritarians. John Dean, based on Altmaier's work and research, wrote a book called Conservatives Without Conscience, which is about authoritarianism within the conservative movement. And the broad estimate is about 20% of Americans are strong authoritarians. And 99% of authoritarians are authoritarian followers. They're authoritarian leaders in their own homes. They tend to be the husbands who beat their wives or yell at their kids or whatever. But in the grand scheme of their lives, they're really authoritarian followers. They're looking for Big Daddy to keep them safe. This comes out of, or the best guess is, there's a big debate about this in the psychology community, but the best guess is this comes out of periods of terrible insecurity during their childhood. And so, they're looking for somebody to say, don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'm in charge. I alone can solve the problem.
Trump, yes.
And they bind to that Big Daddy, and just, you can't peel them away, because this is now the life raft for them, the psychological, emotional, and political life raft. And people who join the military and people who become police officers are authoritarians are way overrepresented in those two populations. Instead of being 20% of the population, the percentage of people who are authoritarians in the police and the military is, depending on which study you look at, and which area you're looking at, and which part of the country you're looking at, almost always well over 50%, and sometimes much
over 50%. Wow.
Yeah. So of course, if you've got authoritarian followers in the military or among police departments, they're going to bond with an authoritarian leader like Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton, the guys who are competing to be the heirs to the mantle of Trump. And so, no, I wasn't surprised. I was horrified, but I wasn't surprised.
It was disconcerting because I wonder many times if Donald Trump thought he had more support in these forces. Remember how the National Guard didn't show up until very much later, and if he thought, I wondered if the plan just kind of went awry a little bit, but that it was much better planned than we thought.
I think it was, and I think we've got this smoking gun memo now that the acting Secretary of Defense, who Donald Trump put into his position the day after it was announced that he lost the election, issued this memos to the DC National Guard saying, you may not show up unless I give the permission. And for 4 hours at least during the storming of the Capitol, numerous people were begging him for that permission, and he was withholding it. That So, I sure hope the FBI is interviewing this guy and all the people around him.
But my question about that, what do you think the intent would have been? To hurt the Congress people, leave us without, like, decapitate the government,
Yes.
the congressional part, and
Yes,
then
hang Mike Pence, assassinate Nancy Pelosi and whoever else you can find. And then Donald Trump would walk in and declare himself emperor, basically. And it would be the end of the American experiment and the beginning of strongman rule, just as has happened in Russia, in Hungary, in Germany in the 30s, in Italy in the 20s, et cetera.
do you think that would have been sustainable with the current military that we have?
It's hard to say. Where Trump tripped up is he has strong support in the military and among police, among the rank and file, because that's where your authoritarian followers are. He didn't have the level of support that he needed in the senior command of the military. I believe that the one force that probably prevented America from experiencing a complete Trump coup was the Joint Chiefs. Was
the letter that they wrote, maybe?
The whole military command structure. These guys take seriously their commitment to the Constitution and to American democracy.
Right. It is a shame how close we came. Now, part 2 of your book, how oligarchy led to the Civil War. Tell me, why did you do that?
Well, this is I mentioned earlier that twice we've had oligarchs rise up and challenge democracy in the United States. The first was in the first half of the 1800s. And it was a result of a technological innovation, the cotton gin. Mm-hmm. Cotton seeds are notoriously difficult to pull out of cotton. Mm-hmm. And the bottleneck in cotton production was taking out the seeds, what's called cleaning the cotton or carding the cotton. And it had to be done by hand, Eli Whitney invented this contraption, the cotton gin, that could do the work. One machine could do the work of 50 enslaved people trying to clean the cotton. But it was a very expensive machine, and it came into common, it was widely available to purchase by 1815, more or less, 1810. It was invented in 1798, but it took a while to get it to market. And so the largest plantations in the South bought these cotton gins, and now they were literally 50 times more productive. I mean, cleaning the cotton was the big bottleneck between growing it and shipping it. Mm-hmm. Most of it went to Europe. Much of it went to Europe anyway. And by eliminating that bottleneck, they became so much more productive and so much more wealthy that they wiped out all their smaller neighbors, because there were a lot of 10-acre and 50-acre and 100-acre cotton farms in the South, across the South, a lot of them. And by the 1830s, by the middle of the 1830s, the vast majority of them were gone. They had been run out of business. Their land had been bought by the giant plantations, and the people who'd lived on those farms were now tenants. Still growing cotton on the same land, and living in the same house, but they didn't own it anymore. Sort of like what we saw when Reagan deregulated, stopped enforcing the antitrust laws in '83, and suddenly we had farm aid. Willie Nelson trying to help out farmers. It was kind of the same dynamic. Well, what happened was, over the next decade, from 1835 to 1845, these giant plantations. The people who owned them reached out to take over political power in the southern states, succeeded in doing that, and turned the southern states, which already were police states. I mean, the Second Amendment was passed to protect the slave patrols in Virginia and South Carolina. I think we've talked about this on your program. Yeah. So they already had that police state apparatus, and they flipped their government into just full-blown fascist oligarchy. But the problem they had was that seeing a functioning democracy north of the Mason-Dixon line was was rousing the rabble, as it were, and not just the people who were enslaved, but the white small farm owners who'd been thrown off their land as a result of this consolidation. And so the oligarchs of the South decided that their best means to survival was to end democracy in the North, and so they declared war on us. And we fought that war, and 600,000 people died. And we broke up that oligarchy to a certain extent. I mean, if Lincoln hadn't been assassinated, we would have succeeded. This huge mistake Lincoln made in choosing Johnson as his VP, but that's a digression. That's a whole nother story. So then the second time, it happened. Again, it was technology. It was the railroad and steel and oil oligarchs who came out of the Industrial Revolution in the 1880s.
Standard Oil and all of them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Rockefeller, Carnegie, et cetera. And Morgan and these guys, rose up and took over the government again. In fact, in the 1920s, Harding, Hoover, Coolidge, and Hoover put them in charge. I mean, you had Morgan as the Secretary of the Treasury, and they crashed the economy, of course, because they had just, during the Roaring 20s, so-called, the wealth of average people actually went down. Pay actually went down, but all this money went to the top, and they had to have some place to put that money. They poured it in the stock market, created a huge bubble, and the rest is history. But that opened a space for Franklin Roosevelt to take them on. And when he started talking about he was going to tear down the oligarchy, he called them economic royalists. When he was going to take them down, they got this group of 100,000 right-wing veterans, this very, very conservative veterans group, signed up to go to the White House and kidnap and either kill or imprison Franklin Roosevelt. And they were going to replace him, with a good conservative Republican. And this is an actual coup attempt.
Yeah, I didn't know you were going to. I read about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only reason that it fell apart was because it's called the businessman's conspiracy. You can look it up. Was because these guys tried to hire Smedley Butler, who was the most famous military hero in the country at the time. The hero of World War I and the Spanish-American War. And Butler blew the whistle on him. And the Congress held hearings for about a week, and then FDR shut it all down because he was afraid other people would get ideas. But he then went to war with the oligarchs and put them back in the bottle. And they stayed there until the 1970s, until the mid-1970s. And then the Supreme Court let them back out again with these two decisions in 76.
Vallejo, yeah.
Yeah. So
that is a shame. And now I think this is the one that you call now a third oligarchy rises with Reagan. What would you call Trump, the Trump era?
Well, it's the logical extension of the process that Reagan put into place, which was shifting America from being a functioning democracy and into a full-blown oligarchy. You could build a case, and I do in the book, that Reagan and many of the people who were with him on this actually thought they were doing the best thing for America. Back in 1951, Russell Kirk, in his book, The Conservative Mind, that kicked off the modern conservative movement, animated Barry Goldwater and William F. Buckley and all these other guys, made the argument that if the middle class continued to get wealthier and wealthier, at that point in time in 51, the middle class was actually, their wealth and their income was growing at a faster percentage rate than was the wealth of the top 1%. And Russell Kirk said, if this middle class gets wealthier and wealthier and more independent, you're going to start seeing young people disrespecting their elders. You're going to see a breakdown of society. Young people will disrespect their elders. Women will disrespect men and their husbands. Minorities will demand equality with white people, and society is going to fall apart. And at first and throughout the 50s and even the early 60s, people thought, Russell Kirk, he's a crank. And Barry Goldwater's into him, but he's still a crank. But then in 61, the birth control pill was legalized. So by 64, 65, you had a full-blown women's rights movement in the work, wanting rights in the workplace and independence from their husbands. I still remember in 1972, it was when the law changed. In 71, Louise and I got married in 71. For her to get a credit card, the bank required my signature.
Yes,
because
imagine
women
that.
couldn't get credit cards. So anyhow, you had this full-blown women's rights movement, women burning their bras. You had young people saying, hell no, I'm not going to go to Vietnam, and burning their draft cards and smoking pot and growing their hair long. And you had African Americans, Martin Luther King leading a civil rights movement. And by the late 60s, you had cities that were on fire. And at that point, the conservatives who had been poo-pooing Russell Kirk looked around and said, holy crap, he was right. And our society is disintegrating, and we've got to dial back the wealth of the middle class. And so Reagan comes into power thinking the most effective way to do that is to destroy the unions. And as a special bonus, the unions are the principal funding source for the Democratic Party. So, hey, we can create a permanent Republican
Permanent majority, moral
Exactly.
majority. Yeah. I promise just a 30-second interruption. As I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, book that I wrote a few ago, as well as It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. It's worth it. I just wrote that one this year. Folks, please give us a call at 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738, or go to kpft.org. Each of these are $120 contribution, or you can get both of them for or $200 contribution. Now back to Thom Hartmann. What is interesting is that there's another piece that I read. Like I said, I selectively go to certain parts of the book, and I noticed you spoke about something I like to talk about a whole lot, and that was how the Powell Manifesto was so well designed to execute the skeleton of this movement. Why don't you tell us a little about that?
Well, in 71, in the late 60s, as I said, it became obvious to these conservative politicians that they believed that Russell Kirk was right. And they thought that we were in the middle of a process that was going to lead to anarchy and the disintegration of America. And so the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Eugene Sindor, met with his old friend and neighbor, Lewis Powell, who was a tobacco lawyer, and asked him to come up with a blueprint for recovering America's greatness, for stopping the chaos. And what Powell said was, okay, we've got to pack the courts with our people, no more of this civil liberties BS. We've got to take over the schools and the colleges. We need to control the textbooks in elementary and high schools, and we need to be putting our people in as professors in the poli-sci and econ classes in particular. So no more socialism being taught in our schools, and history classes as well. Our people need to buy the media. We need to get control of the media and create our own media infrastructure. We need to build think tanks that can get our ideas out and produce papers that will be, our letters to the editor and op-eds that will be published all over newspapers and across the country, and on and on and on. I mean, you're very familiar with the Powell memo too. That was in 71. In 72, Nixon put him on the Supreme Court.
Yes.
He was part of these two decisions, Buckley and Bellotti in 76 and 78, that said that when billionaires or corporations own politicians, it's no longer considered bribery or corruption.
Oh no, it's free. It's speech. Exactly. It's speech, man. You remember we did a few things together, moved to amend in Washington D.C. I mean,
yeah.
So yeah, it is mind-boggling that how things come around. Now, folks, before we go any further, you have to get this book, American Oligarchy, and let me tell you, because I think one of the things I like about your books is that it doesn't only come with complaints. It actually says what we have to do, and and whenever I pick up your book, that is actually the first place I normally go to kind of check out. Okay, so what do we do? So, folks, you need to go ahead and get that book. It is The Hidden History of American Oligarchy: Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. But if I have Thom here, I got to pick Thom's brain on where we are right now. So, Thom, where are we in our democracy? But before I handle that, I want to say, neoliberal versus conservative differences.
Well, increasingly, there's not much difference. I mean, historically, conservative meant in favor of social change, but slow and gradual. Don't disrupt things in the process of improving things. That was kind of the functional definition up until the 1950s. Obviously, there were strains of segregationist racism within the conservative movement and bizarre machoism and things like that. But they were viewed as the lunatic fringe. I mean, witness Dwight Eisenhower's 1954 letter to his brother Edgar, saying, there are some Texas oil billionaires who think you can get rid of Social Security and do away with these social welfare programs. He says their number is small and they are stupid. But the neoliberal philosophy, the idea that basically society should be run for the ruling class, is just an extension of this idea of creating stability in society. It infected the Democratic Party in large part because Reagan was so effective at destroying the unions in the 12 years of the Reagan-Bush administration that Bill Clinton had to go hat in hand to bankers and insurance companies begging for money. He created the DLC so that corporate money could be funneled into the Democratic Party. Before that, the Democratic Party was almost entirely funded by average working people through their union dues. It was the unions but Reagan gutted the unions. When he
You know what
started,
is so sad about the unions part, though, and I find it. I don't know how. Try to find a way to get around it. It's amazing how negative a large percentage of Americans are to unions, and that is because of how they, these guys have done such a good job of defining socialism, defining unions, defining what those key words mean, and it kind of cauterized into people's heads that union bad, socialism bad, all these things that come
40 years
across
of propaganda.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what I was going to say that I think that the job that you do, the job that we're trying to do in the independent progressive media is what has to keep getting done, because the reality is right now, there's no one there's no one really trying to, I don't want to sound presumptuous and say educate Americans, but to at least let them be more aware of how things really work. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the key to solving I talked about the media in the book, that we need to be building a strong progressive media infrastructure, and we don't have that right now. But in terms of where we're at right now, I mentioned that oligarchies typically don't last more than a generation before they either are overthrown or they become police states. And the principal weapon that oligarchy uses against democracy is cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
Cynicism is poison to democracy. And because democracy requires citizen engagement, and if citizens become cynical, they don't engage. And therefore you can't have a functioning democracy. And so we are, we've got about 18 months here. And if Joe Biden and the Democrats can't destroy the filibuster and actually accomplish things for the American people so that we can go back to what public opinion polls show the majority of Americans want, the majority of Americans get. I mean, for over 20 years now, the majority of Americans have wanted no more student debt, no more medical debt, national health care, et cetera. If they can't pull this off in the next 18 months, then the next president will be a Republican and will be almost certainly a fascist. And that's the end of the American experiment. Because they'll say the same thing they did, with Obama and Clinton. Nice talk, but hey, you didn't get a damn thing done.
And I'm wondering if I'm seeing Biden, who I once considered a true neoliberal. I am actually I'm actually seeing another side of him.
Oh yeah.
With the 1.9 trillion and sticking to it, with the stipends that he's given to the American people, which eventually should turn into something like basic income. I am starting to see sort of a resolve that says we're not going to repeat the same mistakes. And if they do that, even if they're not a full-fledged, full progressive, I think it's a good start. Your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. And it's why I have not been willing to go full circular firing squad on Biden at all. I mean,
not at all.
I didn't like that they are, that they're going to means test this $1,400, but, I'm not willing to take anybody down over that. The future, I can't say this strongly enough, emphatically enough, the future of democracy depends on the ability of the Democratic Party to prove that a democracy can deliver results to the people. And the Republicans are going to fight that every step of the way because they want that cynicism. They want people to say, those Democrats, they talk big, but they never do a damn thing. I think I'll vote for the Republican. I mean, keep in mind, Donald Trump stole Bernie Sanders' platform.
Yes.
Donald Trump ran on raising taxes on rich people. He said, I'm going to get slaughtered by this thing. People are going to hate, my friends are going to hate me. He campaigned on a national health care. So he said, everybody's going to have health care and it's going to be cheaper than you can imagine. It'll be better. And he campaigned on bringing factories home from overseas. This was Bernie Sanders' agenda.
Yes.
He was lying through his teeth, but people were like, okay, cool. We're ready for some friggin' change.
But you know what is interesting, Tom? Steve Schmidt, Republican turned Democrat, said exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Democracy.
It's not like it's a mystery. It's fairly obvious, I think.
Maintaining our democracy runs through the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah, I agree. And Schmidt is talking like I am. I mean, he's like, we're at this crisis point. I've been I was first shocked and now very impressed by Steve Schmidt, and I'd love to have a conversation with him. I doubt he would be willing to do it in public about.
I tried to get him. I mean, I wrote a piece about him. He liked the piece. When he liked the piece, he followed me. I said, the good opportunity to get him now. I try to get him. When you get him, let me know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Tom,
why he stuck with the Republicans so long if he's this thoughtful and insightful.
No, he's a true conservative. He believes in small government. He's a true small government type conservative, where the free, I mean, he's a good guy, but he doesn't believe government should be as big as it is. I do believe in big government. I think government needs to be big. That's my opinion, because I think it needs to be bigger than any corporation.
It needs to be as big as it needs to be to meet the needs of the people. Of the country.
Yeah, and that also means being bigger than the corporations as well, because if the corporations are bigger than the government, they own the government,
Right,
so
and you have oligarchy.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, Tom, I asked this, you know this. What would you like to tell me that I didn't ask you and I should have?
I think you did a very good job, Egbert. I can't say it.
Hey guys, if Brother Hartmann says that, it means something. Tom, it's been my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right as usual. Folks, please remember to get the book, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. New York Times bestseller, buddy. Tom, thank you for being on Politics Done Right.
Thank you, Egberto. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on your program with you. You do great.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed Thom Hartmann. Folks, please remember we're still in Fund Drive. Please call 713-526-5738. That is 713-526-5738. My two offers, as I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, a book I wrote concerning the economy, how we actually can reclaim it. And of course, we also have It's Worth It, how to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors. It's all in the name. Folks, each of these books is a $120 contribution. We can always break that up. And $200 if you get them together. 713-526-5738. Again, you can get these, or you can contribute whatever you can to KPFT in the name of Politics Done Right to make sure that we can keep this station alive. Again, that is 713-526-5738 or kpft.org, kpft.org. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out! Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.